however, a very special treat as we run down the year in sports here at Stony Brook. Who better to do it with than the starting goalie for the women's lacrosse team, Charlie Campbell? And as I unmute myself, everybody else can hear me. Welcome, Charlie, to the sports section. And, we are so fortunate to have you here just in the aftermath of a great season, yet another great season, but a little bit of a disappointment because, again, the glass ceiling, 4 attempts at the Final Four and still not able to get past the top seed in the country. But what a battle you get.
Yeah, it was amazing. I know that we complain about seeding a lot, and I think we're justified, but at the end of the day, like Coach Spallina said, if we want to win a national championship, we would have had to have played and beaten them eventually. So it's kind of irrelevant, the order.
Yeah, but it was one of those games where, that really was, the main event game. And that truly, besides the seeding, felt like a Final Four game, especially considering you look at the games that happened beforehand in the day. Both of them were huge blowouts. And here you come, and a lot of folks, underestimating the Seawolves team, maybe partially because of the seeding, obviously, partially because of records, talent on both sides, but everyone I thought showed up, you especially. You really didn't get the win, holding the best team in the nation to 8 goals. It was phenomenal play, and it kind of wraps up what really was a tremendous last month of action for you.
Yeah, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I had the best defense in the country in front of me, and that makes me look like I am also the best goalie in the country, whether or not that may be the case.
Well, it felt like it, especially that series with Drexel and Rutgers, which we'll get into in a minute.
Yeah, thank you. I just felt just so genuinely blessed and lucky to be surrounded by people who work so hard. And, that's why we were able to keep theoretically the best offense in the country to single digits. So if anyone else wants to try and beat our record of 8, because we got them to the lowest, be my guest.
I don't see that.
But yeah, we played our hearts out, and I couldn't be more proud of us. I wish we had had the win as well, obviously. I feel like in Remember the Titans, I wanted the Hall of Fame real bad. I wanted that Final Four real bad.
Well, speaking of which, this is your career path as a lacrosse goalie is very interesting because, well, first of all, let's wind back the clock because you talked to us just before we went on air about graduating from Syosset High School and then going to the University of Virginia, of course, which means you had a lot of experience dealing with North Carolina. But take us through that whole path getting to Stony Brook from there.
Yeah, just quickly. I actually went to St. Anthony's. I didn't enunciate
well before.
You
lived in Syosset. You went to St. Anthony's, which means half my family went there. I went to Chaminade. Boo, yeah. But I'll tell you something. When those two teams go at in boys lacrosse, it's amazing. But
it's like UNC Stony Brook.
But the count, folks. Let's see. 4 siblings went to Holy Family before it became St. Anthony's. 3 nephews and 1 niece. And yeah, so you have a total of about 8 people in my family who went to St. Anthony's or Holy Family before it.
Oh, yeah.
So, long
it's
history there.
School. I recommend it. So I am a bit of a journeyman goalie, I guess you can say, which is pretty fair. I had got recruited before the rules had changed, so I was still 11. I was in 8th grade when I started getting recruited. And yes, and I'm happy that that's illegal now because you shouldn't be able to talk to a 10-year-old child and be like, what are you considering for the rest of your life? But yeah, so I chose the University of Virginia because my ambition is to be a general pediatric trauma surgeon. And I knew that UVA had such an amazing and robust academic tradition, but it also had that lacrosse pedigree that I was looking for because, I'm one of 5 kids. If adults are paying attention to you, something very serious is happening.
Yeah,
and I had adults who weren't in my family paying attention to me, being like, hey, you're actually good at lacrosse, which was very exciting because I'd never been good at a sport before. I was a very chubby kid. And so I went to the University of Virginia. I ended up being there for 5 years. I tore my ACL when I was a senior in high school, so I redshirted my first year there. And then we had the COVID year, so that kind of cut a season short. But then I finished up, I got my undergraduate degree there. I got my 1-year master's there. And then I had this extra year of eligibility. And I really appreciated my time at UVA, but what I really, really wanted was to go back to feeling like I was home, and I wanted to go back to playing Long Island lacrosse. And I knew that the only place that I could authentically get that was Stony Brook. So that's how I ended up here.
So you came to Joe Spallina. I'm sure he knew about you prior from your experience in Virginia, but who approached you first?
So I was a Long Island Yellow Jacket. That was my travel team. Mm-hmm. And the head of Long Island Yellow Jackets is an incredible woman named Carol Rose. And so she saw that I had put myself in the transfer portal, and I'm having my own little panic, like who's going to want a super old goalie? And, she comes to me and said, "What are you doing? Are you leaving this year?" And I was like, no, this is for next year. This is for my 6th year of eligibility. And then she asked me, "Where do you want to go?" And I was like, genuinely anywhere. I want to keep playing lacrosse. Like, I'll go D2 if I have to. But I really, really want to be at home and be, close to my family. My family is very important to me. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm very close with all of my siblings and my parents. And she said, "Do you want to go to Stony Brook?" And I was like, "I would love to go to Stony Brook. Can you help me arrange a meeting?" So it was a mutual. Carol Rose was the godfather behind the scenes organizing all of that. So I essentially begged for a Zoom meeting. And I'm pretty sure the Stony Brook coaches went, "Yeah, sure, we'll hear you out."
Greg Taylor, looks like you want to get a question in. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So, Charlie, excellent end of the season as well, too. I'm intrigued about the trauma surgeon piece. I mean, I think we're going to have to circle back around to that later on. My question for you is, going through that process of transferring because of the extra 5th year, and we're going to have that for the next couple of years in college or sport, what advice would you give to athletes that are going to be going through that at this point in time?
To not be as scared as I was, because I was genuinely worried that no one was going to want me because I was old. And going through that process and having people reach out to me was everyone going, "We want people with experience." Can you imagine someone who already has college experience? And, we don't have to train. It's not like you're getting a freshman out of high school and it's like you have to teach them the pace of the game again. Mm-hmm. And leaning into what you realize your assets are and taking a genuine look at your abilities and your capabilities. Like I have, jokingly said before, I didn't win anything at Virginia, but, I had statistics and I had examples of like, absolutely, I'm actually a good goalie, and to not downplay that, but also realize that might not be what every single coach is looking for. So you have to find a place where you fit, where you're needed. Because everyone wants to feel needed at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. It does set things up very nicely for this season, though, because, well, first of all, before the season started, or right around the time the season was starting, word came down from the America East administrators that Stony Brook would be ineligible. I see the look on your face, and I know where I'm going with this. Would be ineligible to compete in the America East tournament. And the first thing that popped into our heads as we were dealing with the emotional letdown that a lot of the other teams were experiencing was that, you know what? Women's lacrosse could probably pull this off.
Yeah, I know this is not a visual medium, but the expression on my face was not a positive one.
No, it definitely was not.
I was furious because what sheer amount of petty cruelty it takes to take out your administrative spats on children who have already been through hell the past couple of years.
Exactly.
That was unforgivable to me. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to personally attack any of the administrators or anything like that, but I genuinely am very upset that they couldn't quite look past the scope of their boardroom onto all the literal children that they were affecting with that decision. That made me genuinely upset. And, it's not a personal attack, but genuinely I was just so angry. And my heart broke for everyone who, didn't have a chance if they didn't get that automatic qualifier, because you have these teams who men's lacrosse is a great example. Like they could have won that tournament and they could have gotten that AQ and they could have been, they could have pulled a Delaware
easily. Maybe
they would be playing in the quarterfinals right now, and to take that chance away from people is something that, and I realize that I'm a 6th year and I'm playing with house money. but I realize how precious these opportunities are. And that just just broke my heart. But women's lacrosse, it was a different feeling because we were grieving for all of our friends. Mm-hmm. But then we realized with the schedule that had been, concocted already by our coaches, that if we won all the games that we were supposed to win, we should very much so, we would technically be a bubble team, but we would get, one of those bids. And so our attitude was not fear and uncertainty. It was more like, we really need to buckle down and go to work because we only get one shot at this, and one mistake means we don't get to go.
Did that become a rallying call, a bond amongst the teammates in the locker room? Did that become something that you focused on, or is it just something you kind of filed away and went with as the year went on, almost like a reminder every once in a while?
That's interesting. I genuinely think it depends on the player, because some people are able to be motivated much more strongly by the big picture and be like, I know everything that's at stake, and I need to take all of that with me, and I need to take all of that into account. I need to have all the data in front of me. And that's what informs my play. And that's what makes sure that, I push so hard. And then other players are very much like, look, man, I'm taking it a day at a time. I don't even know who we're playing after this game. I know our next opponent, and that's it. And genuinely, whichever way people went in order to stay focused and play their best lacrosse is the way that people went. But I think it was probably in the backs of everyone's minds, if not the forefront.
Yeah, particularly when you're facing ranked teams. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were clearly pissed about it.
Yeah.
Did that carry you then, I guess, on a day-to-day basis? Or is it just something that you kind of filed away and knew going into the season, I guess?
It was very much like an, oh, okay, kind of moment for us.
Right.
So I hate bullies more than anything. I am a public health major. My undergraduate degree was human biology, which is public health and the physical sciences. My graduate degree was a master's in educational psychology, social foundations of education. I am a goalkeeper. I have a little brother who is 18 months younger than me. I cannot stand when people are not protected and when people get picked on. And I felt like this was such a beautiful example. Let's go with beautiful example of people who were not in positions of power being picked on. And that makes me so angry that it motivated us we were going to play our very best lacrosse, and we were going to make sure that if we could score, we would score. If we could block them, if we could knock down a shot, if we could make sure that people's, streaks were snapped, we would. Yeah. And I think it motivated us to play our most strong, physical, shut down, burn it all down lacrosse. That's what we did.
And it's funny just looking at, facing these American East teams. The highest team got was UMBC with 8. On the other end, y'all got to 20 against UMBC in that same game. And just looking at the averages, y'all were scoring about 17 goals a game. And you and Halsall were only allowing about maybe 5, 6 on average, maybe lower than that, nationally. It was clear, that besides, obviously the team was already on another level, just with all the talent there compared to the rest of the conference. It's not a surprise. But it was definitely, in past games, I think back to games like Hartford, UMass Lowell, for example, maybe, towards the end of the second half, pump the brakes a little bit, kind of just kill the running clock. There was none of that this year.
No, we refused to stop or settle because we had accepted their decision, and though we couldn't do anything about it in terms of the postseason, we could get our little bit of retribution back on the field. And that's what we did. And I'm not ashamed to say that. That's what we did.
Good for you. I mean, you shouldn't be ashamed to do that. And that's what you do when you're an athlete. You go out and you perform, and you do it to the best of your ability. And when you're on the field, you perform at the highest level you possibly can. And you guys showed it this year for sure. And it was very impressive to watch here and, the entire year, to be honest with you.
And thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, go on, please. Go ahead.
They hurt my family. They hurt my family, and that's not acceptable.
No.
Ever.
Matt.
Speaking of family, because we saw this all year. Let's say one player gets shut down, someone else steps up. I mean, I won't call it a turning point, but it definitely drove a message home to me that everybody was on the same page and everybody was buying in. That I forget which game it was. Maybe Greg Ken can will remember where the scoring was starting to sputter a little bit, and all of a sudden, like 3 straight times, Siobhan Rafferty cuts across the net and buries one, and turns the game around completely. And and then you're not hearing from the usual suspects, but you have like a second line of scorers taking over the game, and that becomes such a huge asset because now the defense on the other side can't figure out who's going to burn them. And that was a perfect example of, okay, this team's for real. I mean, not that they weren't beforehand, but this really drove the point. For me, it really drove the point home.
Coach Spallina's constant refrain was next man up. And everyone had to be ready. Everyone had to be prepared. We all went through those practices together. Almost all of us did extra work, so it didn't feel like extra work. It just felt like we had extra practices. And I know I definitely stayed whenever I would look around and someone was like kind of eyeing a ball bag. I'd definitely be like, "Hey, you want a goalie?" We just wanted to make a statement that it was next man up. It was no drop off. It was we all deserve to be here because we've all worked so hard to be here. I believe that was the strongest motivation for us.
Matthew Kearns, I know you wanted to jump in. You got something for us?
Yeah, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on. I was able to I just started commenting. I was able to get all of the playoff games, Drexel, Rutgers, and Carolina. And the one that really stood out to me was both the Drexel and really the Rutgers game, honestly. But one of the, I played guys lacrosse in high school, and, I would watch a lot of the girls. That was by far one of the best goaltending performances I had seen in a while on either guys or girls. Like you, it was you were that like the X factor in that game. Like had you not been in net, I think that game could have gone the other way. What was
12 saves, by the way. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, that's like. What would you say? Were you just like dialed in, or would you say what was it about the game that you felt like you were able to come up so clutch?
First of all, thank you so much. That's an incredibly kind thing to say.
Yeah, of course.
The league this year has had some pretty incredible goalie performances. I really appreciate it. We were prepared, and we knew that game was going to be a dogfight. We knew Drexel was going to be a dogfight, because you're in the postseason. Every team is good. There's no such thing as an easy win in the NCAA tournament. Scores may indicate that, but it doesn't feel easy when you're on the field. And I don't necessarily think I was something special, but we did the proper work to make sure that we were as prepared as possible for that offensive set. I watched film. I made sure I knew all their 8-meter tendencies. I made sure I knew if Cassidy Spillis is cutting across the crease. Is she going to shoot behind me, or is she going to shoot in front of me? Is she going to shoot low, or does she like to burn me off stick side hip? You had to look for tendencies, and then you have to react to the shot as it goes, but put yourself in the most advantageous position to give yourself the highest percentage chance of getting that save. And there's a lot of really strange statistical analysis that goes into being a goalie, and a lot of us are really loud personalities and we seem like dorks, but the successful ones do all of that work beforehand to make sure that nothing is a surprise come game time.
Absolutely. And just on Cassidy Spillis, that was a masterclass about in defending and goaltending, because she took 11 shots in that contest, got 2 past you, but all three of her free position chances were knocked down by you. So that's quite literally just kicking it out. But it was absolutely just phenomenal. And, for those who weren't able to see it, could you kind of describe your goaltending, I guess, your preferred style, what you like to do, especially preparing against a free position shot against some of these incredibly talented shooters like Cassidy?
It's interesting. So if you watch me get ready for an 8-meter, I used to be very stiff and like jumpy, trying to get the excess energy out. And this year I tried a different tactic. I mentioned before how much I love football. And the Pittsburgh Steelers kicker, before he takes the kick, is a little shimmy. So I decided that's such a great idea to get the little bit of excess energy out, but my feet are already planted and I'm in the position where I need to be. So I'm not, twitchy and going to go on their first fake, but also like genuinely I've noticed who has the foul, but once the girl's lined up on the hash, I don't look at her anymore. I just stare at the ball. So if it's one of those people who physically puts it on the ground and only picks it up right before, I'm not looking at her. I'm not looking at her stick. I'm just staring at the ball and I'm focusing in on that. And I found that to be the most helpful way to narrow your focus. You just do a 1,000-yard stare right at that ball and then nothing else really matters, because I trust my defense to go exactly where they need to be to make sure that there aren't any of those, garbage goals, pass across the 8 kind of things.
Obviously, this past year was your best year as a goalie.
By far.
By far.
Yeah, by far.
Now, we were just talking only a few minutes ago that year may not have happened. Mm-hmm. How fortunate do you consider yourself that you got that extra year and were able to flourish so much? I mean, how much does it influence your life in general, knowing that you reached another height? Is it, the rest should be easy.
I just genuinely, lottery winners have nothing on me. I feel so incredibly blessed just to be here. And I know people saw how giggly and smiley I was in that post-game interview that I had after Rutgers, and people were just wondering, is that what just you're like? And I was like, yes, I'm just so happy that I was given this chance, because most people would just be done. And some people had this opportunity and didn't take it. And I was nervous, incredibly nervous, I would say. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I was really, really scared that maybe I'd peaked in high school. Maybe college lacrosse maybe I just wasn't good enough. Maybe it just wasn't for me. And I knew that I would always regret not taking that last chance. I would regret it for the rest of my life and go, what if that was a season that you felt you played how you could play? What if that was a season where you felt in control? What if that was a season where you felt as confident as you did in 11th grade, which we're all just trying to get back to, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
Everything I could have freaking dreamed of, everything I joked about with my parents at the beginning of the year is can you imagine if I got an accolade? And I did, and I happy tears just thinking about it.
America's Goalie of the Year,
lucky.
in case people are wondering what you the award specifically referring to. America's Goalie of the Year. No, we talked about it beforehand, but I realize that the listeners might not know.
Yeah, that's how she shows them that she's mad. She wins their award.
Absolutely. The funny thing too, you told us beforehand was, it felt like maybe a lot of your teammates, maybe because especially of how they treated all of y'all, probably, didn't think too much of it. It was kind of given that Stony Brook was going to win in virtually every category. But for you, this one was really precious. Ken, just talk more about that.
I have been through all of the years where it felt like nothing you did mattered. And it was completely, it didn't matter how hard you worked. It didn't matter how hard you tried. No one was paying attention. No one was there to give you the kiss on your forehead and the gold star on your homework. That wasn't happening. But I just was desperate for someone to say, hey, good job. And I didn't need necessarily a trophy for that, but I'm always try to remember how dark that felt for me. And just feeling like maybe I just am bad at lacrosse, maybe it was a fluke. And going to practice every day and being like, hey, that was a great shot. Hey, that was a great ground ball. Hey, you worked really hard today. And trying to go through that, but also reminding myself that I need to talk to myself that way, and just trying to keep going. Not necessarily because I wanted to prove it to everyone around me. I just really wanted to prove it to myself that I was good enough and that it wasn't a mistake. None of, the success that I had wasn't a mistake, and I did work hard enough. And then to have that physical recognition at the end of the season was a dream come true. And it was just one of those moments where I could sit down for the first time in about 6 years, and I went, "Oh my God, I'm proud of myself."
It sets up a
and
great
that felt
question.
So wonderful.
It sets up a great question because now you got 3 degrees, right?
Yep.
Okay, so 2 from UVA and 1 from Stony Brook.
Yes.
Okay, so you said you're going to go to med school.
Yes.
When do you want to start that? Because the question is obviously that now that you realize how great you are at lacrosse, and you considering maybe staying in the sport as a coach, or you know what? I'll give you a perfect example. On the women's soccer, the first Women's World Cup soccer champion, Julie Foudy was on that team, and she was ready to go to med school, and she delayed it to play pro. And eventually, I think she did eventually go. But are you at a little bit of an impasse in terms of lacrosse? Or are you just saying, okay, nope, that's it. That's one stage of my life. I'm going on to the next one.
Oh, I'm not done. I'm going to play for as long as I physically can. But I also know that I also want to be prepared for medical school. I have to study for the MCATs, and I have 3 more courses that I need to take because it never worked with my schedule at either school, which is hilarious because that's what being a student athlete is. It's taking summer classes as often as you can. So I want to be able to apply and get into med school, not this coming fall, but next fall. But being prepared for and necessarily applying are 2 different things.
Right.
I have to see if I have that opportunity to still play.
So
you're only young once.
So could we see you on the sidelines as a GA here?
Oh, no, I don't think I'm a good idea to be a coach. Genuinely. I don't think that my prowess lies in teaching people who are only a year younger than me. I'm a Yellow Jacket coach for 2030s, so they're in 4th grade. I tend to shine a little bit better when I'm dealing with people who are first getting into the sport and going through all the same insecurities I had, which was, I'm not even an athlete. I don't know what I'm doing here. My mom thought this was a good idea, but helping them realize that, lacrosse could be fun and this could be something that you go with for the rest of your life. That's what I would do as opposed to being a graduate assistant. And
not only that, great schools play lacrosse. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, as a St. Anthony's grad, you would know this. As a Chaminade grad, I know this. And you want to get into Navy, play lacrosse. Men and women, by the way. Yeah.
My mother actually has a great story because, again, I was a little bit of a chunky kid, and I'm still thick with 3 C's. Like, I'm still a bigger person. But her hope was that, A, I would get out of the house. Fantastic. But B, when she realized that, actually, you have really fast hands from playing video games with your brothers, that she was hoping that it would open the door to get into a college. And her dream was, Charlie might be able to apply for an Ivy. Because, look at all the hard work that I've done for X amount of years. Clearly I'm very, stick-to-itiveness is a good feature of mine. And I don't think we could have dreamed that, I started playing lacrosse in 3rd grade, that, 5 short years later, I would start getting recruited. So it kind of spiraled very quickly.
UVA is no slouch.
No, thank you.
No, I'm saying that honestly because it was actually considered. And remember when I was a junior in high school that it was considered a very solid Ivy alternative. That you go to UVA, they have better athletic programs, everything like that. Everything that the Ivies lack, plus the academics are equal. Go to UVA.
Nice weather.
That's also true.
In addition to something else that, Hanover, New Hampshire isn't exactly warm for most of the year. Duke and UVA definitely pride themselves on being kind of those Ivies of the South.
Yeah.
In particular, no offense to other ACC schools. It's just that I feel like that is the chip particularly that is on the shoulder of Duke and UVA. And that rigorous academic tradition is something that I really, really wanted, in addition to the lacrosse tradition.
One fascinating thing that I talked about in other interviews was kind of the differences and parallels, really differences between the UVA and Stony Brook in women's lacrosse. You kind of just go over them again, kind of what you saw, on the field, off the field, just how they play the game of lacrosse differently compared to from under Coach Meyers compared to Coach Spallina.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely delineated quite severely between Long Island lacrosse and then Southern lacrosse. Southern lacrosse, which I played at UVA, is very much a sort of, it has to be elegant, almost as though it is a dance. And we have to have a million contingency plans and like have all these perfect bumpers set up, like just in case this goes wrong, we can go this way, or we can go this way, and we can have like this really elegant solution as though we thought of everything. Like when Sherlock Holmes is going through a fight in his head, he's already seen every single possible example of what's going to happen. I feel like that's a lot of Southern lacrosse. It's very cerebral, and it has to be pretty, but tends to be focused on like that very precise technical form, almost like ballet or some other performing art or something like that. And then Long Island,
or
not necessarily scripted, but you had to win the right way.
That's a great point.
There was a big emphasis on the image and the optics. And Long Island lacrosse is, I don't care if I have to truck you, I'm getting to that ball. That's a weight room issue. Be stronger than me.
Yeah,
exactly. And I am not an elegant person. I was much better at if you think you can hit me hard enough that I'm going to flinch next time you shoot that ball, you got another thing coming. You're going to have to hit me 10 more times. And you know what? That's 10 more saves for me.
Yeah, no, it definitely showed.
That was the difference.
Not only in the numbers, but also just in the play. And I think that chemistry from everyone, in the locker room, at least that we were able to see. And I forgot it was you, or maybe it was Coach Spallina. He had said, it's okay, Stony Brook's not playing in the conference tournament because the practices are harder than the games themselves. Could you kind of take us through what a practice looks like, really a scrimmage, like a captain scrimmage looks like in stuff for Stony Brook?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right in that Coach Spallina has probably said something similar to that, but I said at the very beginning of the year that I have had captain's practices here that are harder than games I have played in.
Wild.
And there's something so irresistibly contagious about physical sports and physical lacrosse. It's, if you see someone diving for a ball like it's the national championship and it's a Tuesday scrimmage on a week that we don't even have a game and it means nothing, it's not like one team's going to run and the other team isn't, that is how you make sure that you play your best lacrosse, because you see someone giving their all and you have to raise yourself up to their level. You have to. Otherwise, what the hell are you even doing there? And there's something about how our coaches really let us hop into that driver's seat and dictated, how hard we wanted to work for ourselves. Because, Coach Spallina would remind us perhaps on days when we were flagging a little bit that the most successful teams that he has had have been the ones that demand accountability from themselves. It's not demanded from the coaches. The players demand it from one another. And we strove every single practice to say, 3v2s are my least favorite drill, but you know what? I'm absolutely going to crush this drill because I know that I'm going to need these skills in games. And I don't care that, they're not going to be 3 balls on the field at once. And I'm going to have time to, set up to a ball usually on the field. It didn't matter that it wasn't a perfect mirror of what was going to happen on game day. What mattered is that you forced yourself to be successful in impossible situations. So big games didn't seem impossible.
Sets up another great question, because you just talked about ACC style lacrosse, and I'm thinking about that North Carolina game, and Matthew Kearns and Greg Taylor called it for us. We actually in the studio, but we saw it on video, and I'm thinking there was one ride in particular in the third quarter that Greg said, left the team with only like 40 seconds left on the shot clock. And I started to feel it was almost like a turning point where North Carolina's ride really started to clamp down. And I'm thinking, what you just said about how choreographed they are and how do the styles, especially in that game, how did they mesh? How did they clash? How'd that work?
So in the Carolina game, I mean, we held them down. We did. We kept them under 10. But I understand what you're saying in that, clearly they were able to be more successful against us than we were against them, obviously, because we lost. And I think that the reason certain ACC schools have become more successful is because they get a lot of Long Island kids who aren't afraid to do that gritty ride and actually hustle and try. Instead of being like, we're going to perfectly contain you, so you have to do a stupid pass, which I think was the ACC strategy before. And perhaps the lower half of that conference still is trying to pursue strategies like that, where it's perfect containment as opposed to harnessing the physicality and strength of their players. And I think UNC, Jenny Levy's no dummy. She's an amazing coach. That's why she's the U.S. coach. She realizes that utilizing and forming a system that not only recognizes but amplifies the talents and strengths and physicality of her players is what makes her so successful. And I think that's why, they held us to 5, we held them to 8, it looked like a field hockey score.
The baseball game was more high scoring than UNC Stony Brook game, where they baseball lost 18-16. And I was laughing that's a lacrosse score. That was in a baseball game. The day after, y'all held UNC to 8. It was hilarious.
Yeah, and we had a baseball score.
Yeah,
I think that's completely fair. But that's why, because we both are teams that utilize a system that's designed for the betterment of the team. To paraphrase from Miracle, and we utilize that talent and that strength and that grittiness, and we're able to, have the best game of the entire day, and what might even be the best game of the tournament. I don't know how the Final Four is going to go, but
I think you guys might have played the de facto final.
Yeah, we were saying that beforehand.
I think so too.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way, just with how hot UNC was, and obviously the ride Stony Brook was on, that last month plus, where really, since the Northwestern loss is really where the team picked it up, because they managed to score at least 16 goals in most of the games, and defensively, obviously, clamping your opponents down to single digits every time, minus the Yale game, but still, that was only 10 goals allowed. I mean, what was it? That was really a turning point in the team. So could you kind of just talk us through how you and the team viewed those 2 losses at the start of the season, Syracuse and Northwestern?
We were angry at ourselves because we knew we had the talent to win those games, and we didn't execute. And that's always very, very frustrating, especially as a student athlete, because whenever you have a loss like that, where it's like, I know I'm talented enough to beat this team, the immediate reaction that most of us had was, I didn't try hard enough, or I didn't work hard enough. And that gets under your skin like nothing else. It feels like glass under there, and there's nothing you can do to like soothe that ache other than to, work so much harder and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's what we did. That's why we had a 15-16 game winning streak or whatever it was.
Well, we got a good laugh out of the fact that the other quarterfinal bracket, the winner of which is facing North Carolina, obviously, but would have, had you beaten them, you would have had to face one of those 2 teams. Northwestern and Syracuse playing each other. And Northwestern, I mean, they all the other games are one-sided, we know that, or at least not in terms of the score. But that would have been a real turnaround, having to face one of the teams that beat you earlier in the season in the Final Four. But I still think that the seedings should have been such that you should have been facing North Carolina in the Final Four. Speaking of seedings, I mean, you've only been with the team 1 year, but you probably know the history. That Stony Brook has a history of getting shortchanged in the seedings.
I mean, I remember when Stony Brook was number 1 in the country for literally the entire year and undefeated, and then got the 5th seed. And I'm at UVA going, I'm just happy to get picked for the tournament because we were 500 every single year, baby. And we were like, where are we going to go? Usually UNC. And, that is genuinely egregious. It's not a once or twice thing. It's genuinely every year you watch this team do something incredible. They break a record. They extend their, win streak on Kenny B for, another. We only had 5 home games this year, which was upsetting. And then the other 2 for Drexel and Rutgers in the postseason. But every single year, you have this team that is clearly of the highest caliber, and people refuse to recognize it. And I can't imagine how frustrating that is. Because I showed up and I was like, hey, 8th seed. That's awesome. I think it's the highest I've ever been seeded. And then I remembered, hey, we're like 4th or 5th. Why aren't we 8th? And then no one in that room was surprised. We were watching the selection show, which is worse, which is genuinely worse, because we had beat Florida in a head-to-head, and we had a higher RPI than I think it was Loyola. And no disrespect to either of those teams. They're great teams, but if you win a head-to-head, you should be ranked above someone.
And you literally played a big part in that win against Florida, holding them. It was a 1-goal game, but obviously you were and Stony Brook was victorious in that game. That was the other egregious part to me. It's like, what's the point of you, 8 saves there, getting the win, 28 shots faced? What's the point when they're just going to bump you 2 spots ahead of you and your team, regardless of that? It's insane.
Yeah. And it's always frustrating to not feel as though you get the recognition you deserve. I will tell a silly family story, which is how I try to deal with it. My grandfather was a very stern, hardworking man, but he loved a practical joke every now and then. But every Christmas, he felt it was duty bound to make sure that everyone got a present, right? That had helped work for him. So he would send fruit baskets, right? And this is in the late 80s, early 90s, right? I promise I'll be fast. I'm sorry. But he would send a fruit basket. And there's this one, is it Dean? Who's the Dean from Animal House? Like that?
Oh, Dean Wormer.
Dean Wormer. Wormer, thank you. Like that kind of guy. Like nothing is funny. Nothing has joy in it. And he sent my grandfather a letter after Christmas, not a thank you letter, saying, we don't like fruit baskets. Please do not send them again. But we do appreciate the idea. And every single year, my grandfather would just send a bigger fruit basket because he thought that was hilarious. But, realizing that people are not going to recognize necessarily all that you do for them or the things that you have accomplished, but every single year coming back with a bigger fruit basket and refusing to back down and be the one that blinks just to repay that disrespect with more and more kindness. I feel like that's what Stony Brook keeps doing, but it's like our success is even bigger this year. How are you going to kick me in the face again? And the sheer determination that the coaching and administrative staffs have to deal with that year in, year out. I felt exhausted, and I was only here for a year, but they're still doing it, and it's incredible. And we refuse to back down.
Yeah, even in the game against UNC, right? Just look at the free position opportunities. Stony Brook got 1 at the very end of the game. UNC had 9 against you. You did a great job, stopped the 7 of them. But did you feel that was a fair? Honestly, you could say, honestly, did you feel that was a fair, representation of how the game was, where Stony Brook was just playing so aggressive, in the arc that UNC warranted 9 free position chances?
I'm not surprised that they had more than us. I'm surprised that we had so little.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you play at somebody else's house. That's part and parcel, par for the course. Oh, shocker. We had 22 fouls and they had 9. Whatever. that happens.
Felt like it.
But I think just the frustration that is doing everything we can to have people understand that we are for real and have them take us seriously and consistently kind of being spat on. That's what wears you down. Yeah. But right now we're just, every single time we go, you pick yourself back up and you just keep going. And this team just keeps going. It happens every year, but it doesn't matter. Put us in the 8th seed again. Eventually we're going to get through and you're going to look like an idiot.
I was saying, from the player side, do you feel like this move to the CAA is finally going to, put some respect on Stony Brook's name, to where, because it's CAA and not America East, and there's no Hartford, there's no UMass Lowell, no NGIT, etc., that they'll at least be a 6 seed come next season if they played it the same way?
Maybe. Genuinely, the CAA, it has the fact that JMU was in it, won a national championship while part of the CAA. I know they're not part of the conference anymore, but that will probably help considerably. The RPI goes up considerably. We're back in Hofstra's conference again, so I'm sure they're thrilled about. But I think that it can only help, because you have to start getting the pedigree that other people will accept and finally take you seriously with, which is so incredibly frustrating, because nobody likes a microwave dynasty. The fact that, how did you get that success that quickly? Absolutely not. Your program should have to be established for 40 years before you should even dream of begging for a national championship. And that's incredibly frustrating, because sometimes you have people that are that good and work that hard, and I don't care that it took you 40 years. It took us 10. Deal with it, But there's something that being in a conference that I suppose the wider lacrosse audience will take more seriously will finally, I hope, give Stony Brook the recognition it deserves and should have had before now.
The sport of lacrosse, both men's and women's, you're like dealing with the establishment. Syracuse and Northwestern, perfect examples of established lacrosse schools, especially on the women's side, and then on the men's side too. And up until these past 2 years, Stony Brook men had never even played Syracuse, and the only time they ever played Johns Hopkins was in an NCAA tournament game 10 years ago. And it's like you're trying to break through. I mean, Bill Tierney goes out to Denver and wins a national championship. Trying to break through that establishment that owned the sport, it was like the same 3 or 4 schools every year. It seems to be such a challenge, especially. I think that's one of the reasons why Stony Brook has gotten shortchanged. That here are these people. They don't play anybody. They don't deserve any respect. So that's why we get the shaft all the time.
People crave respectability and credentials, despite the fact that those two things are not necessary to be competent. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, people deemed the AAC incompetent, despite what a program within it could do. It didn't matter. It was, Stony Brook only has the best scoring defense because you're in that conference. You're in the ACC. If you were in a quote unquote real conference, then you wouldn't have those numbers. You wouldn't be nearly as successful. You're not as good as you think you are. And, then we get to go play a Big Ten team and we win. It's like, so who's the one who was mistaken here? I don't think it was us.
Right. 5-2.
You look at the scoreboard.
5-2 versus top 25 teams. Yeah, kind of says it all right there. Yeah, but
it's frustrating. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. The team really took it in stride. Obviously, just tremendous talent. I feel like we got to talk about the players as well alongside yourself. Well, actually, beforehand, first talk about the coaching. How was it with you and the coaching? Specifically, obviously, kind of comparing Coach Meyers from UVA and Coach Spallina, as well as his coaching staff.
So I think the biggest difference I can think of is I called Coach Meyers Julie, but Coach Spallina was Coach Spallina. He was not someone I ever called Joe.
No, he doesn't like that.
No.
We don't even do it.
I'm a child and he's an adult. I shouldn't call him Joe. I think that, and I mean this in an incredibly respectful way, Coach Spallina would be an incredible cult leader, because he is so good at having everyone focus in and be like, the only thing that we need is here in this room. All that matters are the people here in this room. And the rest of the world doesn't matter. It just doesn't. And you are willing to lay down on the wire and let somebody else crawl over you, because that means the team will win. That's what you do. And that's what he inspires. that sort of all or nothing, life or death feeling of I need to do as much as I physically can for the person next to me because I know they do it for me. And not that, UVA wasn't that same, chemistry. Like those were still, that was still my family. Those were still my sisters. But the intensity of Coach Spallina is, a Category 5 hurricane, compared to a tropical storm. And, it was there's something about that seriousness that you don't understand. If we don't come together, no one is rooting for us. We will crumble if we are not, a sturdy foundation. And he's correct in that assertion. No one is rooting for us. We're rooting for us. That's about it. And that inspiration of we have to come together because we're all we have. That is probably the biggest difference, because in the ACC, I was UVA. I was one of the oldest, colleges in the nation, one of the oldest programs for lacrosse. People understood and respected without me having to do anything. I had a Virginia shirt on and people were like, yes, that means something to me. Stony Brook, I had to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to continue earning it.
Yeah, and just talking about that foundation, I feel like, it's evident what you're saying, because we saw it too, I think, in the goaltending itself, because as you coming from UVA, you didn't just get the number one goalie spot. You had to earn it against another number one goalie in Cameron Halsall, who was the top goaltender for Stony Brook the past couple of seasons. So could you talk about that, kind of that off season, how that went for you, the battles between you and Halsall? What's the relationship like? I think first off, was it very, very gritty, very intense? Was it, was it calm, cool? How's that like?
Well, between Cam and I?
Yeah.
Cam and I are friends. All goalies are friends. I understand what you mean. Yeah, we were competing with one another and we made ourselves better, and we forced ourselves to be better. I need to play lacrosse like other people need to breathe. I do. And that was my motivation. And I don't know what metaphor Cam has in her own head, but I'm sure she has something that's equally as serious to her. She plays for her country. I'm never going to even try out for the US team. So, there's obviously a difference in opportunity isn't the right word, but there's a difference in already established caliber. There's me showing up who hasn't felt like I've achieved much of anything. And I think that absolute desperation of I have to prove, at least to myself, that I am a good goalie, I think that's what caused me to constantly be out on the field, to, especially with the freshmen. I was like, hey, you guys want to shoot? Because they maybe didn't get as many reps, or, they were still learning and they're like, I don't know how to shoot this way, or I don't know quite, the 8-meter stance they're asking me to do. I was like, that's fine. Right. I'll work on it with you. And always constantly trying to be always there, because I knew this is it for me. I'm never going to play college lacrosse again, ever. And this was the thing that I had been working for 10 years before I got to college. And I just felt that hourglass. I felt like there were about 2 grains of sand left in it, and I had to do something before it was done. I had to.
No, absolutely. And, I thought it was evident too, Coach Spallina put a lot of faith in you. We saw that really from the first game of the season when he tabbed you as the starter for that game. His number 3 Syracuse, obviously coming up big in a tight game like that. But it was interesting too, just throughout, especially the start of the season, he used both of you in a tandem, kind of like we're watching an NHL game where, we'll take the Rangers, one game Shesterkin's in that, and the next game Gorgiev's in that. And it really wasn't until really the middle of the season, towards the end, once conference play started picking up, where you were the de facto number 1, at least in terms of playing time. So what was that like throughout the season and kind of earning that true number 1 spot?
We never knew who was going to start before a game. I had to wait for the PA announcer to either say my name or not say my name. We did not know. So constantly standing there, desperate to get on that field first, that motivates you like nothing else. To not know, to not be sure. And knowing that at any point it could change. It's not yours at any point, but it could be yours for right now. You know, that constantly walking on eggshells or broken glass, however you want to describe it, felt like broken glass to me a couple times.
Yeah.
That kept me motivated like nothing else, because I felt like every single day I had to earn it. Every single day I had to earn that spot, or I had to earn the right to at least go in for a half every day. So I felt like I've aged about 10 years this last year.
Yeah, no, it's stressful, but obviously paying off. We're here, Charlie Campbell on Sports Section, WUSB 9.1 FM, and I want to talk about defense as well, because besides the great goaltending, obviously this team boasts tremendous defense. Haley Dillon obviously was a huge part in that, but really just the whole defense as a whole. What was that relationship like during the week and on the field?
I mean, Haley Dillon is a Leviathan, obviously, that a lot of people will focus in on, but I can't tell you how I would just watch these girls around me. I'd watch Ella Whitehouse, Claire Levy, Emily Vangilio, Deanna Weisberg. Like, I'd watch these girls around me and I'd just be like, they're not human. A human being should not be able to play with that much intensity for that long, for an entire game.
It's insane. Moore's at 100, all game long.
And I just, I was there. And I'm like, I'm just me. I'm just Charlie. I got to be better than that. I can't just be Charlie. And they were all so willing to sacrifice. It didn't matter how tired we were, because we complain and be like, oh my God, it's so hot, or oh my God, I'm so tired, or oh my God, it's been, X amount of hours. But there we were, still trying to make knockdowns, still trying to make the saves, still trying to, make sure that our attack was ready for really physical play, and make sure that we were ready, because we weren't going to get trucked by any attackers. Absolutely not. No one was pushing through us. And that they motivated me to work until I felt like I was coming unglued. And it was incredible. I can't describe to you how it felt to have superheroes surround you and feel like you were just human and keep striving to try and be a superhero.
Yeah, and that was just defensively. Someone who Matt and Greg, I think, really, and myself as well, who really amazed us all season on the attack was Ellie Macera. And Greg, you had actually said it. Just I forgot what the words were exactly. Maybe you could say it, but it was like there's the things she's able to do it's unreal.
Yeah, kind of.
She shouldn't be able to do it, right?
Greg.
Yeah, I just think that she kind of, what I thought about Ellie Macera this year is that she improved as the year went on. And I thought that was like an incredible feat to do within the season itself. It's one thing to improve in the off season or to improve within the fall, but she improved in the season as it went on as well too. Just the level of her play I thought was fascinating to watch, and a credit to herself and to the team, I guess, as well too, with how hard you guys push each other. The one thing I wanted to ask you though is you seemingly enjoyed playing for Coach Spallina, but you called him a Category 5 hurricane and a cult leader, which was,
I mean that in a positive way though.
But we kind of referred to you guys during the game as well too, because we didn't know who was starting, and it sounds like now that you guys didn't know who was starting either.
That's insane.
But like an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
Really for you guys, just two really strong goaltenders. And what was it like for you though, as a goalie, playing your best at the end of the season and into the playoffs? Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
Mm-hmm. I think it's what kids dream of, isn't it? I started playing lacrosse when I was in 3rd grade, and 4th grade I was like, yeah, you're not running, so you're just gonna stay in this circle. I didn't, I was a true goalie as an 8-year-old. And I just wanted to be the goalie that team deserved. And I didn't get us to the Final Four, so I wasn't quite what the team deserved, but I just wanted to give it everything I had and walk out of here with no regrets. That's what I wanted. I wanted to get through however long the season lasted. Unfortunately, it was a little shorter than we wanted, but just at the end of it, realize that was everything I could have physically given, because that's what they deserved. That's what that team had earned from me.
Well, mission accomplished there, because you certainly did. And for us as well too, we don't feel like you guys win the Rutgers game if you don't play as well as you do.
Absolutely.
It really, you should be credited for that win as well too. I mean, it was really spectacular. Yeah. I mean, just in as far as the playoff run is concerned as well. I mean, now my next question, I don't know if this is going to be hard or not. Do you watch the Final Four?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I was wondering what your plans were for that, if you'd be able to sit down and watch it or not. I think that might be hard to do that.
I completely appreciate that question, because some people are like, nope, I'm disconnecting for the rest of the year.
We had some series in the past say that, where, they lost and they can't really, maybe in the background, but they're not going out there to watch it. No.
Oh, physically going to Baltimore?
No. Like,
they're not doing that.
I was say some of the Seawolves did. They just, they didn't watch the Final Four. They couldn't do it. Couldn't handle it. So it's big, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you came out so quickly with that answer as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm watching it. What's the matter with you?
This is a question that's asked all the time, because, of course, if you get knocked out of a tournament, no matter what round you're in, do you want the team that beat you to go all the way, or do you want the next team that team faces to knock them out? And of course, the debate goes either way. But what's your take on that? You want North Carolina to go all the way, because that will maybe prove how good the Seawolves were against them.
So that will justify, quote unquote, our loss, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Sort of. Yeah.
It depends on the game. Usually, I feel like there have obviously been controversial finishes in NCAA history.
Oh, yes.
And I say that as someone who was at UVA when UVA men definitely didn't score against Medicine in Maryland, but they called it a goal. But we were like, no, it counts. It totally counts. But I think that if you have a game where you feel like the other person is a pretender to the throne, then you do want them to lose. But if you feel like the team legitimately beat you, then you're like, that team can succeed if they like. I actually, we're discussing this as a team, like, if not us, who would win? And my assessment of the teams that were left, this is, obviously during the grade 8, so I didn't know who the Final Four was going to be. I thought that if we couldn't beat them, because I thought we were the only team that really had a shot, I thought they were going to win.
We did too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That was my initial gut reaction to that. I don't think that Stony Brook really has anything more to prove. So I don't think we necessarily need a justification. I think we've clearly shown, hey, every other team lost by 10, and the one game that was supposed to be a blowout wasn't. So that's kind of on you, NCAA selection committee.
And it was primetime too.
Yeah. Love that for us. Yeah. Dana Boyle and Leah Secundo were the whole time going, this is not an 8th seed, which I thought was great. But I think that it depends on how you lost, is how you answer that question. I'm not the kind of person to hold grudges unless a team cheated or something like that. And then I'm like, I want them to lose, definitely. But UNC can win, UNC can lose. I felt like we should have beaten them, and that's on me. That's something I have to deal with. The rest of the tournament may go as it pleases, because I can't change that.
Now, what's next for you? I mean, you talk about becoming a trauma surgeon. I mean, what pushes you in that direction to do something like that? That was the last thing that I thought would be your desire in life. Not that I thought anything, that really put too much thought into what you
think I would do.
Yeah. Well, actually, to be honest with you, just listening to the conversation beforehand, I didn't ask you any questions before the interview had started. Number one, I thought you'd be a fantastic teacher because of the energy that you have.
Thank you.
But then also now listening to you speak and answering your questions that you've done really so well here. Broadcasting should be in your future as well too, with the energy that you have as well. I mean, those two things. I mean, you're so articulate, and the questions that we're asking you and your answers are fantastic. So those are two other things that you could, kind of think about as well too. And then when you brought up the fact that you work with a 4th grade Yellow Jackets team, I was like, well, maybe an elementary school teacher would be, in line, because you have this charismatic personality. Right, that you don't see on the field. That's the one thing that's the downside of being in the booth and watching the game and stuff, is that we don't necessarily as fans get to see these energetic personalities from the athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've actually wanted to be a trauma surgeon since I was 6, but I was getting a little bit older. I'm realizing that I specifically wanted to be a general as opposed to orthopedic. It's not important, but orthopedic trauma surgeon would specifically reconstruct people's joints. A general trauma surgeon would reconstruct basically like your whole body. It's a lot of thoracic injuries and stuff like that. So like really bad car accidents, stuff like that would be what I want to do. I love putting things back together. I love fixing things. And I know that I have a really strong stomach, so it might as well be people.
Helps out, yeah.
And I'm very, very protective. I'm a goalie. I'm a public health major. I protect people. It's just what I do. It's who I am as a person. And I know that an emergency room, and especially not a pediatric emergency room, that's not a popular job. But I know it's something that would make me feel as though I was giving the very best of myself back to the universe, to a life that's been very good to me. Like I feel like I owe that to the world at large, to be the best fixer I can be. And that amalgam of, you love protecting people, especially people who typically aren't in positions of power. I can deal with the goriest injuries that you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And just, knowing that I don't panic in stressful situations. What else could I do?
Interestingly enough, Stony Brook is one of the leading trauma centers. I think it's the trauma center for Suffolk County.
Yes.
So, perfect setup. Are you considering applying here for med school?
Yeah, I'm going to apply everywhere. But I definitely have looked at various level 1 trauma wards that I would like to be near or go near. I know the JABSOM, which is the Jesse Burns School of Medicine, which is at the University of Hawaii, University of Virginia's medical school, Stony Brook, and then NYU. The big ones typically tend to be in city. Yeah, schools that are difficult to get into. I have my work cut out for me.
Yeah. Well, you've already been to 2 of them.
Yeah.
Stony Brook aren't easy to get in undergrad. Yeah.
Not the medical schools, though. That's a whole different beast.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, I'm going to apply everywhere and hope that someone thinks that I'm a good idea. That's what I'm going to do.
I see it happening, especially because just how much you've accomplished already. We're looking at sport of lacrosse, but I think it's a great example. Just everything you've been through. Obviously, St. Anthony's playing through the torn ACL, so many championships, going to Virginia, coming back. Just all the accomplishments. I think you make possible for sure. And just for me, my final question is, I guess, what are you looking forward to the most now that at least this collegiate lacrosse experience is over? Maybe you go professionally later, or coach, or stick to trying to be a surgeon. But what are you looking forward to the most just in the future?
As being a non-collegiate athlete?
Yeah.
There are little things like being there for my family that I'm definitely looking forward to. What am I looking forward to the most? I think all of the little passion projects and things that I've wanted to do that I know I couldn't necessarily do because I didn't have the time or, the energy to do them justice. I'm a one-love facilitator, so I was able to bring that to Stony Brook and see every single team and talk about relationship abuse, which is what I love. But actually, being able to go out and do things for me in addition to protecting people and, being able to be like, I'm going to go see a movie today or something like that, where my schedule is not quite so rigidly controlled as to be just giving my all for other people, to also do that purely for myself, which it sounds a little selfish, but being able to do something that's purely for myself and discovering, who I am as a person, because it's been about 6 years since I've checked in. I'm really looking forward to being like, yeah, I do want to pursue that. That's something that touches a heartstring of mine, and being able to listen to that voice and not necessarily tunnel vision and going, this doesn't really serve me right now, but I'll think about it later. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Matthew Kearns, you wanted to get a question in?
Yeah, so I know you said you don't like being a coach, so I don't want to put you in a tough spot, but I know when I'm watching either men's or women's lacrosse from the TV, I'm always shouting. I think I know I do that with any sport that I'm a fan. I think I know what's best. But you actually played both Northwestern and North Carolina now, and obviously you said you're going to be watching the games. So from your perspective, like watching it, if you have to put your coaching hat on for either team, what would you say are like the keys to win for them?
Northwestern has to be more consistent on its clear and give each other enough space in the attack, because they can get very crowded, and I think that can also cause them to get very frantic. UNC has been a buzzsaw this season, and they crushed Northwestern last time they played them, so I feel like the biggest issue for them would be complacency and perhaps going in with overconfidence, because you're going against a coach who won 7 national championships in a row. And if anyone can make an adjustment, it's Kelly Monty Hiller. So I think sticking to their game plan, whatever it may be, if it's similar to how they played us, then they'll probably be successful. But I think sticking to that game plan, which is the amalgam of having a sort of rigidly structured attack, but also utilizing the strength and physicality of their players and continuing to honor the fact that they have an all-star team, but they need to use those all-stars in a system. That's what they need to do to win.
Yeah.
They can't rely on just their very, very monumental talents on that team, but they can't just rely on those talents.
Great points.
You heard it here.
I got one more question. I might have 2 or 3. It depends on how far we go with this, Charlie.
Okay.
The first question, I said I only had one, but okay. What is what are you going to miss the most?
Oh, everything. What am I going to miss the most? I am going to miss the physical, tangible pieces of being on a team. Because we'll always be each other's family, and it doesn't matter how far we move away. But the fact that I don't have a locker room to go to where, 10 people will just be there and it's like, cheers, I'll walk in instead of Norm, everyone will go Charlie. The fact that you aren't there in close proximity to one another, and just like you feel like you are secure and a part of something that's so important and bigger than yourself, that's what I'm going to miss. That sensation of being on a team that is, bled and cried and sweat together. That's what I'm going to miss the most.
Believe it is 100% wrong, because it is so true. It really is. There's nothing truer than that. And, we can tell you, because we're old now, if you consider yourself old, like we're old, and like we're like super old. If that's the case, but like
ancient.
Yeah. I mean, we'll run into our college friends now, and it'll be like it was yesterday that we were, that we were together in the experience that you kind of are just finishing up with as well too. So, I mean, that kind of like falls right back into place right after you spend like 2 seconds saying hello to each other, and then you kind of fall right back into the old routine of kind of just going back into it. What are you going to take from lacrosse and your experience here and use towards the rest of your life?
Take from lacrosse, or specifically from Stony Brook lacrosse? I'm sorry.
It could be either or. It could be Stony Brook. It could be just a lacrosse experience. What is something that you've learned that you're going to take with you and apply or adapt to the rest of your life?
No gesture is too small. No amount of time, even if you feel like you didn't get better, none of that is wasted time. And no tiny gesture, no check-in with your teammate, no, extra ground ball practice or extra shooting practice, none of that is wasted. None of those gestures ever don't matter. Because, cosmically, I feel like a lot of us feel as though some of our actions are so small as to be meaningless, but they all mean something. And you never know when just saying hi to someone saves their life that day. And that's what I'm going to take away from lacrosse, particularly Stony Brook lacrosse, is nothing you do doesn't matter. Everything you do can help someone that you didn't even know was struggling.
Right. To the world, you can be one person, but to one person, you could be the world. Right. That concept.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I tell you what, it's been fascinating listening to you and asking you questions and talking to you. I mean, it has been an absolute pleasure for me. I know that much.
All of us.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. This has been wonderful for us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
The pleasure was just as much ours, and thank you so much for your time. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about you. We learned a lot about the program. And what's even better yet, knowing that the team and the athletes, and you in particular, shared a lot of the same feelings we did over the course of the season. That's kind of affirming for us too.
Yeah, I'm blessed to be a Seawolf. What can I say?
Well, we were blessed to have you for this year.
For a good time, not a long time.
Yeah.
We expect to be hearing from you in the future. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. Athletes Limited draft is a week and a half away, so fingers crossed on that. I'm going to sound biased, but honestly, I'm not trying to sound biased. If they pass up on you, I feel like it's a big mistake, just because, as I said, top 10 goalie, especially entering now, the performance you had this year, and the drafts, it's a bit smaller, but the talent level there is so high, and I think especially this year you showed you qualified for it, especially with all the accolades you earned. So wishing you the best, obviously, in whatever in all of the ventures you choose coming up.
How many times have we watched players in college, and pick a sport, doesn't matter which, prove themselves in the postseason?
Absolutely.
They have a great tournament run, great bowl game or something like that, and that shoots them up several places in the draft, because everybody knows it's how you perform in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. If you're in the NBA, if your playoff scoring average is higher than your regular season, it shows what kind of player you are. So, I think you definitely proved yourself over this last run here. No doubt about it.
And if you need an agent, Ken and Matt are here for you.
Awesome. Guys, if I get drafted, genuinely, y'all can split my first paycheck. I don't think it's I really appreciate it.
If you get drafted, we're inviting you back on, celebrate, because it's a phenomenal accomplishment. Obviously, joining two great alums like Kylie O'Miller of the GOAT and Allie Kennedy. So, but yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you guys so much. This has been one of the best years of my life, if not the best year of my life, and you guys are just one of the shining examples of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you too, and hey, many more to come.
Let's go.
Definitely, many more to come. Charlie Campbell, goalie for the Stony Brook Seawolves this past year, grad student, 3 degrees and counting, and we hope to be hearing a lot more from her in the future. And I'll tell you something, if I get in a car accident, I hope you're the one who saves me.
Oh,
I hope you never need me.
yeah.